Welcome to This Week in Virginia, and a very special welcome to Senator Ghazala Hashmi, who represents Powhatan and a part of Chesterfield and a part of the city of Richmond. Began serving in the Senate in 2020. After a long career of 30 years of working as an educator in Virginia's colleges and universities, serving both as a professor of English and as the founding director of the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning at Reynolds Community College. Your educational background was Georgia Southern University with a BA in English, and we probably could talk about your love of poetry, which probably started there, and then your PhD in American Literature from Emory University. Senator Hashmi serves on 4 major committees. The one that we will be focusing on throughout most of the show will be the Committee of Education and Health, where you chair the Public Education Subcommittee. But before we jump right in on that, let me welcome a co-host, Hadia Ali, who's a senior at Virginia Commonwealth University, who's studying in international affairs, and then I love it, it says international social justice. What a great focus. And Hadia is going to lead off with some questions that she's been telling me that she would like to ask, and so our viewers can learn. So Hadia, it's yours.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey, and thank you, Senator Hashmi. We are so excited that you're here with us today. I am actually very curious to know a little bit more about your background and how your background may have affected your time in politics.
Well, that is a great question, and I can certainly understand why some people might see it as rather odd that after 30 years in higher education, I chose a slightly different path, and that is to move into the political world. But it actually seems very, very straightforward and natural to me. I grew up in a very political household. My father taught political science, and Hadia, you would be interested. He also taught international relations, and he founded the Center for International Studies at Georgia Southern University. So I grew up in an environment that was really rich in conversation around the issues of politics, international affairs, the ways in which government impacts our lives. And so when I did choose to go into literature, my examination of literature was also based around the ways in which literature, primarily American literature, shapes our ideas of democracy, and how poetry, philosophy, and the writings of American artists identified and gave the narrative of what it means to be participants in a new experiment in which the voice of the common man was elevated in a democratic ideal. And so politics has been in my blood, you might say, and this has been a very, very natural next step for me. It's been a hugely fulfilling next step as well.
That is amazing. And you're right. Is there any particular things you might have faced during your time as an educator that may have led you to politics in that way?
Absolutely. So for me, I never imagined when I was working on my graduate degree that I would be working in a community college system. We didn't have such a robust community college system in Georgia. But when I moved to Virginia and saw the extensive effort that community colleges provide in Virginia, and I began teaching at Reynolds Community College, I really got a broad understanding of the ways in which our community colleges in particular provide access and opportunity for so many people to be able to achieve their higher education dreams and to achieve degrees and get credentials to get jobs that are meaningful to them. And so working in the community college really opened my eyes to the ways in which higher education policy impacts directly the lives of the people that I was working with. And I knew that we could do better as a state, that we had to do better. I had students in my classes who were struggling with food insecurity, housing insecurity, uh, facing challenges in buying textbooks or paying their tuition, working full time so that they could go part time to school. And I really wanted to be in a realm where I could impact higher education policy and help, hopefully, impact the ways in which we provide opportunity to Virginians.
That is true. As a senior in college, I can confirm it is really tough out here for us. So that's amazing that you've worked so hard to sort of continue to provide Virginian students with that opportunity. Um, I would also kind of like to get to know your ethnic background a little bit. As someone of Pakistani descent, um, I would say that we're in the minority in Virginia, but like in politics especially. So I'd kind of love to know more about how maybe your ethnic background has affected your time in politics as a brown Muslim woman.
That is a really great question. And, it's become so important for me that I really do represent uh, minority communities, people who feel like they are not seen or that they don't see themselves in so many different spaces, including our government. And I want, in particular, young women such as yourself to see themselves represented and to understand that there are so many different ways to be involved, to be engaged, and to actually have an impact. I remember growing up as a young Muslim child in Southeast Georgia. We were the only Muslim family. And if I even encountered a byline, an author, say, for instance, in Time Magazine or Newsweek, that had a name that resonated with my background, my religion, or my ethnicity, I was absolutely thrilled just to see that representation in writing. And so I know what an impact it makes to see someone who looks like you, resembles you in different positions in office. We all need that. And I know I craved it when I was a young professional. I craved it as I searched for mentors. And so we really need to continue to ensure that there is broad representation in so many different areas.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. And thank you for being that representation. I know you're that representation for me, especially because I haven't seen a lot of people that look like us in politics. And I'm sure you're that same representation for the rest of the Brown community in Virginia. So thank you for that. And I'm actually going to hand it over to Mr. Bailey, who has a few questions of his own.
Hadia, you have done a great job in laying the groundwork, and thank you so much for co-hosting, and Senator Hashmi for your answering those very thought-provoking questions. And if anyone wants to know something else about you, we're going to put it up on our screen. We would encourage them to go to your website. I love the big quote that you have there when you talk about your involvement. And there's just great information on the website. And so people can go there and dig in a bit more. But let's talk about education issues, because I think there is some agreement, and it's agreement coming from different angles and different viewpoints. There's agreement that education is one of the top issues in the 22 legislative session. And you're chairing that key subcommittee on K-12. Tell our viewers some about the kind of issues that you've been wrestling with. And of course, there are some that you will be wrestling with yet as you consider House bills very soon.
Well, it has been such a critical topic. And as you well know, with COVID and the impact that it has had on our education system in particular, there have been so many different ways that we've had to address the crisis and to certainly help our students, their families, our teachers, our school administrators manage and emerge from what we've been through in these past 2 years. And to be honest, it has not been easy. It's probably been the most challenging time that so many of us have faced, and most particularly our local school divisions, our school boards, and all of the folks who work in our public education system. I think COVID made us really realize how absolutely vital public education is, that it serves such a tremendous need for our students and their families. It's also so essential for our economy. Parents cannot work if they are not feeling safe about where their children are, and making sure that their children are well taken care of. So much depends on an effective school system. And early on in this country, we all agreed that public education is a public good, that it serves a vital need for us as a foundational cornerstone for our democracy. And I think we need to keep reminding ourselves of that. So some of the issues that we have, of course, been addressing is navigating the COVID crisis, making sure that our children are safe, that they are able to continue the return to school, and that we are practicing health safety measures. As you well know, we are quite divided on that particular issue. Many of us in the General Assembly want to ensure that there is health and safety protections following CDC guidelines, which still ask that our students be wearing masks. Some of our youngest children cannot get vaccinated yet. And if they have older siblings who are in school, the fear and the concern, of course, is that the virus would continue to spread. We also have children who are immunocompromised. We've got teachers and staff who need to be protected. And it's a simple measure to make sure that our students are able to keep their mask on in order to ensure public health safety. There was a great divide on that. We saw the governor just signed a bill recently that essentially takes away the authority of the local school boards and has rescinded the mask mandate in our schools. So that's going to be a continuing issue that we will monitor. But apart from the COVID crisis and the areas that it's impacted, I think one area that we're really excited about, and this is a bipartisan bill that is being carried by Delegate Coiner in the House of Delegates, and Senator Lucas in our Senate. She's chair of our Education and Health Committee, and this is around literacy. We know that children who struggle with reading issues are facing great challenges. And so this is an exciting bill. It's an opportunity for Virginia to re-examine the ways in which we provide education in reading. And it is well supported by academics and research coming out of University of Virginia and elsewhere. And so we are hopeful that these new approaches are going to transform the literacy schools for especially our most vulnerable students. One bill similar that I am carrying as well this session is the English Learner Bill. And this is for students who come to school with lower levels of proficiency in English, because we have such large, diverse immigrant communities in Virginia. And we need to ensure that children who have language skills in other languages are able to transition effectively into reading, writing, and comprehension of English. And so that is a bill that I hope will get good support in our House, and that we will be able to continue to expand our opportunities. So one thing I'll say is that we have been caught up in a lot of culture wars around education, and I think that is a terrible distraction. As an educator myself, we really need to focus on the core issues that impact student learning. We need to continue to focus on those critical areas of reading, writing, and mathematics if we want to create productive and sound citizens who are able to meet the challenges of this new century.
You know, you talked about the cultural wars. Let me pick up on that. I think that, and get your thoughts and comments about race being taught in public schools, and that's depending on how someone frames that. It sounds like it's the most terrible thing that could happen, and others who see it as something it's telling the whole history, the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything. Help our viewers understand what that issue really is about.
You know, I think I have an example from my own teaching days that just hit me to the core one time. And this was about 10, 15 years ago, where I was teaching a class. I teach American literature, and I teach about slavery. I teach about the racial situations in this country through literature. It permeates our literary writing in the 17th, 18th, 19th century, and is very much an important part of our discussions. I was teaching texts from the Civil War, and this young African-American woman stopped me as I was talking, and she said, "Can you please explain to me what the Civil War was? I've heard a lot about it all throughout my life, but I have no idea what the Civil War was." And that caught me off guard. It took my breath away, because here was a young African-American woman who had born and raised in Richmond, the heart of the Confederacy. And she had gone through her public education system and had never really been taught what the Civil War was. And that is the challenge that we have. If we don't talk about these issues, if we don't talk about the complexities of the racial situation in this country, we are really preventing our students from understanding who they are, what their history is about, and how they move forward, how we all move forward as a country. And for me as an academic, really the one place that is safe for these kinds of complex discussions is in the classroom. Because in the academic context, we're able to take away some of the vitriolic rhetoric. We're able to look at issues objectively. We're able to look at facts and use the text of our own narrative and examine these very important subjects. And in fact, my job as an educator, which I always took seriously in the classroom, was to teach people how to talk about complex issues in an objective, thoughtful, and frankly, compassionate way that understood that there were different perspectives, different objectives that had to be taken into consideration. If we take that opportunity away from our educators, we are teaching a whole generation of people that we cannot examine issues that challenge us, that force us to think, that ask us to engage in conversations that are difficult. And we take away the ability to actually have fully developed engagement around these very critical issues. We're reduced to just the kind of 30-second sound bites and talking points that we already see too much of in our public discourse. And I think that's a real shame.
Thank you for that very thoughtful answer. I was just trying to think who would say something opposite of that, because that was so clear, and I think that I would hope that we all want what you were just describing, that we would want that. Charter schools, lab schools, they're in the news a lot. Charter schools have been in the news a decade or more here in Virginia. Lab schools, not as much. Say a little bit about those, and maybe help point out the the potential differences, or sometimes I hear them being described in the way they almost overlap.
Yes, and they are different, and we want to make sure everybody understands that they are different. So just a couple of points. First of all, in Virginia, we've always had the opportunity to establish charter schools. We've always had the opportunity, at least for now, well over a decade, for laboratory schools. But they serve different purposes, and they are in different parts of the Virginia Code. So with public charter schools, any local school division, a school board can establish a public charter school if they so desire, and if the parents are in agreement with it. In fact, we have good quality public charter schools in Virginia. We've got one right here in Richmond in Patrick Henry. That's in my district. And so that is the agreement between a local school board, school division, and the parents and the communities to engage an outside agency beyond the school system itself to establish a school that will meet the needs of the community, or that will provide specialized instruction or reflect what the families want. And so the system has long been in place, and there are opportunities for school boards to do that if they so desire. And that's the key, is that it really is a local decision, as it ought to be. What the governor has proposed is that authority from the local school boards be taken away and moved into the state school board and the Board of Education at the state level. And that's not something I'm talking to our school boards, our teachers, and even our community members. Nobody really wants that. Nobody wants a state level decision-making process when school boards have the opportunity to reflect. They are elected by community members, and they should reflect the values of that community and the desires of that community. And so in the Senate, we have not passed any of the changes in regarding charter schools. And so the charter school system as it exists in Virginia is continuing for the time being, of course. Laboratory schools are a different creature. I'm a product of a laboratory school. One of the best education experiences, I think. I just absolutely loved my experience. I was there from kindergarten to ninth grade, and I still keep in touch with some of my teachers from the laboratory school. And a laboratory school historically is a school that has a very strong relationship with a college, a university that has a school of education, and provides an opportunity. The reason it's called a laboratory school is that it provides the opportunity of the students, the college students who are going into education, who want to become teachers, to actually have the opportunity to come and teach and participate in the classroom setting and learn from experienced and seasoned teachers. It's a wonderful model that has really helped develop our next generation of educators. So that's the model that was also established in Virginia, I think around 2010, 2011. I know Senator Jen McClellan carried that legislation over a decade ago. And so that's been a possibility for Virginia colleges and universities to establish this relationship. Now, one reason why we don't see a lot of laboratory schools anymore, not just in Virginia, but throughout the country, is that the whole model of teacher preparation has really undergone a lot of changes. Many schools of education are not as I would say they're a little bit more fragmented than they historically have been, in that people who are interested in going into the teaching profession will major in other areas and also take education classes, but really diversify their educational background. So we don't really have a lot of laboratory schools. Now, the proposal that has come out of the Senate is a bill carried by Senator Todd Pillion, and it allows a college to work in partnership with a local school division to establish a laboratory school if it should so desires, and offer a program, an education program to the students there, much in the way of a specialty center. So if a college would like to establish a STEM education degree, STEM education track, a track in liberal arts or performing arts, it has that opportunity to do that. But this is a pretty big undertaking for a university to do, and to establish such an educational relationship with a local school requires thought, care, consideration. I know the governor wants to see 20 schools, 20 plus schools, laboratory schools get off the ground in the next year or so. Educators know that that is not the way to do it. To establish it fully and purposefully, we need to have conversations. We need to make sure that the relationship between the colleges and the local school divisions are sound. And we need to know whether this is what the community itself wants to, the direction they want to go in. So I absolutely recommend that we approach it with care and thought, and understand what our larger objectives are. So I hope that that is going to be the model we follow.
Okay, thank you. I promised Hadia that she would get the last question. So Hadia, back to you before we thank the senator.
Of course. And I'd like to say thank you in advance because it's been very informative. Thank you for shining light on such important educational issues. But my final question for you was, what advice do you have for young women, particularly young women of color that are looking to get into politics?
That is such a great question. And I encourage, well, everybody should get involved in the level that they want to be engaged. And you don't have to run for office in order to have an impact in government. And in fact, running for an elected seat is probably not the best way to go for a lot of people for many, many reasons. But there are so many opportunities to work in government, whether it's local, state, national. We have government offices and agencies that really need bright, inquisitive, talented, and passionate young folks. And so I would always encourage anybody to take a look at opportunities to do internship, to talk to people who are working in different levels of government and in different agencies, and take advantage of everything that you can. I always position my own life in a way that I never said no to any open door. So if an opportunity came up to challenge myself or to do things that I didn't see myself doing before, I would do it just to see what I could learn and what different direction I could grow in. So I would encourage young women in particular to take advantage of different opportunities, seek out mentors, and engage at every level that's possible.
That's amazing. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Hadia, thank you for being co-host for this, your first show to co-host. And Senator Hashmi, thank you so much for being our guest on This Week in Virginia. This has been just as we expected, so very informative and so very thoughtful, just as you are. So thank you very much. We look forward to following you and your work in the last weeks of this session and then on beyond that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful to talk to both of you.